Is 2025 finally the year that the Nittany Lions can break through? Drew Eller back at quarterback, Nick Singleton and Katrin Allen back at running back. They stole Ohio State's defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles. Everything is lining up for 2025 to be Penn State's best season ever. And taking a look at their schedule, they're going to start off 3-0 without a doubt. These first three games, really nothing needs to be mentioned. None of these teams have any chance of pulling off an upset against the Nittany Lions.
Without a doubt, all those players you mentioned returning on offense, not to mention Trevor Pena coming in from Syracuse at the wide receiver position, finally getting a really good wide receiver weapon for a Penn State quarterback. And then on defense, like you said, Jim Knowles in from Ohio State, but they have solid edge rushers and solid defensive linemen at every single position. So many guys getting comparisons to Chop Robinson, Abdul Carter, Micah Parsons, Penn State legends, and there's absolutely no way Penn State does not start the year 3-0. But that early bye week going into that Oregon game at home, say about it what you will, that could either be really good to get you in the right headspace for such a big game, or it could be a little uneasy after three really easy games. You want to keep that momentum going, but I think with the returning production that Penn State has and Oregon having some questions, especially with Dante Moore likely going to be the starting quarterback, can he play at a high enough level on par with like Dylan Gabriel last year to keep Oregon as one of the powerhouses in the Big Ten? I don't know, but even with the weapons around him, I think he can still be serviceable. But serviceable in a whiteout at Beaver Stadium is not going to be good enough. Penn State's going to get a signature win in week 5 against the Oregon Ducks.
I couldn't agree more. Like you said, Dante Moore, I think he's going to struggle in this road environment because the only other road environment he'll have a start in is Northwestern, who doesn't even have a stadium. That there's just no way, in my mind, that Dante Moore is going to be ready to face this Penn State team. Now, one thing that could potentially level the playing field a little bit is the fact that Penn State gave themselves such a cupcake non-conference schedule. They will have not played anybody close to the level of talent that Oregon has. Meanwhile, Oregon will have played Oregon State at this point, along with some other relatively decent schools. Oklahoma State, we know, struggled a lot last year, going to again this year. Road trip to Northwestern. Northwestern is not going to be very good, but still better than anybody Penn State's played. So I think Oregon will be a little more prepared, but again, the whiteout is a brutal environment to try and conquer, and I believe Penn State will be able to defend the home turf heading into their road matchup with Nico Iamaleava and UCLA. A lot of people really high on UCLA after they brought in Nico. I think there's still a lot of question marks around this team, and there's no doubt that they'll improve a little bit, but I don't see them pulling off a home win against a team like Penn State.
It's the meme of the Bugatti car at the old rundown house or whatever. Nico is the overpaid quarterback star player at UCLA surrounded by no weapons. He's going to have his work cut out for him. And yeah, he's going to be able to be the franchise player for the program. But with no help around him, I don't think he's going to have a very productive season. And Penn State's going to eat him alive. Following week, they have yet another pretty easy game. This one being Northwestern. Like you said earlier with Oregon, it's not a very good Northwestern team. They've kind of fallen off the face of the earth since Big Ten got rid of the conferences. And that was really the only time Northwestern was ever very good. They do have Preston Stone coming in from SMU, who did have some starting experience early on last year before getting benched for Kevin Jennings. So maybe they have a little stability at the quarterback position. But much like UCLA, he's probably their best player, and the supporting cast around him is not going to help him very much against such a good Penn State team, especially at home at Beaver Stadium. Penn State's going to start 6-0.
Next game as well, Iowa on the road. Should be a little bit tougher than their previous two, but this Penn State team will now be battle tested having played Oregon. Iowa is bringing in Mark Gronowski, a quarterback out of the FCS from South Dakota State, and I think he's going to maybe help this Iowa offense improve a little bit. But again, Iowa, they're a defensive team. They're going to try and keep this game low scoring. Unfortunately for the Hawkeyes, I think Penn State has the better defense here. They obviously have the better offense. Really no chance of Penn State losing this game either. They're going to move to 7-0 heading into their second bye week before one of the most anticipated matchups of the season.
Absolutely, Jonah. It's Jim Knowles' return to the shoe to face the reigning national champs, the Ohio State Buckeyes. I don't know how to feel about this game. On the one hand, the Buckeyes have to replace 14 NFL draftees along with three undrafted free agents on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, along with losing both their offensive and defensive coordinators. So every single key position is going to have young guys coming in, talented, but still young guys. They still have Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, who you could argue are the best offensive and defensive players in college football. But Penn State's got all the returning production back after almost beating Ohio State at Beaver Stadium last year. But on the other side, you look at history, Ohio State does not lose to Penn State in big games outside of the 1 year in 2016 or whatever it was. Jonah can correct me if I'm wrong, but Ohio State just in the past has not lost to Penn State no matter how good they are. And with it being at the shoe, I don't think they're going to lose. I think Ohio State is going to get a huge win over a Penn State team that is probably going to be in the top four, if not a top two team in the country at this point.
Penn State, again, this is probably their best chance to actually beat Ohio State that they have had since they pulled off that win back in 2016. As we know, they've squandered a few in the past few seasons. There was a stretch where this game was decided by 1 point back to back years. Penn State always makes it close, but they can never come through in the end. I don't really think that this game at Ohio State is where they're going to be able to do it. But again, with the way that the college football playoff is formatted now, there's a chance that these two teams can meet again. And on a neutral field, we'd have to revisit our prediction for that one. But for right now, the Buckeyes should get this win at home and drop Penn State to 7-1. However, the Nittany Lions are back at home to face another team who made the college football playoffs last season in Indiana. Won't be a super easy game, but I do believe that the Hoosiers are not quite as good as Penn State. They did bring in Fernando Mendoza to replace Curtis Rourke at the quarterback position out of California. Very highly ranked among quarterback prospects for the 2026 NFL draft. I think that Kurt Cignetti is going to have Indiana in a very solid place again in 2025, but I don't really see them competing in this tough Penn State environment.
I think they have very solid players and weapons on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Like you said, Fernando Mendoza is going to be a very welcome addition to the Big Ten and will make his mark. But I think Indiana's hype from last year is going to be accredited to having a pretty easy schedule. When you look at it, their two best opponents were Ohio State and Notre Dame in the college football playoffs. They lost both those games. Granted, they were hanging with Ohio State for a little bit, and the score in the Notre Dame game was close at the end, although that doesn't really reflect how the game went. I don't really think that Indiana is going to have as good of a season in 2025. I still think they're going to be a very good team, but I think with their schedule difficulty, we're not going to see them in the top four in the Big Ten standings. And I think Penn State just outclasses them at every position, especially coming off that Ohio State loss that will probably be a close game. I think they're going to come back and just thump the Hoosiers.
Definitely a big way to bounce back and certainly push Penn State back up in those CFP rankings, which will be a great help for them. Now, this next game, definitely one to watch out for a road trip to a very young, very talented Michigan State team that a lot of people I think are overlooking. If you saw our college football playoff dark horses video from a few days ago, you'll know that we think Michigan State has a solid chance to maybe surprise a lot of people this year. It all depends on Aiden Childs and how he performs. I think this could potentially be a game where where Penn State gets upset. However, we are going to go with the Nittany Lions on the road, but this one might be a little closer than some people would expect.
Definitely a trap game considering the two opponents they have prior to this game. And really, it's going to come down to can Michigan State get a stop in this game? Obviously, I'm projecting way far in the future, but I think Michigan State's offense is going to be just as good as we've seen it. You already mentioned Aiden Childs at quarterback. Nick Marsh was a tremendous freshman wide receiver last year in the Big Ten, obviously outshined by Jeremiah Smith. But in year two for both of them, I think their offense can just become even more explosive. They just need one stop because their defense is losing a lot of their senior leadership. So they can get one stop and still go tit for tat with Penn State offensively, they have a shot. Nebraska's kind of in the same boat. This is a little different considering Nebraska is going to have to play at Beaver Stadium, but Dylan Raiola has shown time and time again in his career at Nebraska that he is a really solid quarterback. I wouldn't say he lives up to his Patrick Mahomes comparisons. It's kind of scary how close he's trying to be like him, but regardless, Dylan Raiola is a very gifted athlete, great dual threat capability, throws the ball pretty well, and has good weapons around him. And Nebraska's defense last year was probably one of the most underrated in the country. I don't think they gave up a rushing touchdown until maybe week 7 or something like that. I don't know the exact number, but going into the Ohio State game, which I believe was week 5 or 6, they had not allowed a single rushing touchdown. So if the defense can play to that level again, Nebraska can be a very solid team. But once again, against this Penn State team that is returning so much starting production and bringing in so much good production, I don't think they stand a chance. They'll move to 10-1 here.
And then finally closing out the season with a road trip to Rutgers. Not really much to talk about here. Greg Schiano doing the best he can with what he has at the Scarlet Knights program, but there's just really no comparison between these two teams. Penn State wins this game every single year, and it's not particularly close. They're going to win it again this season and finish 11-1. Our way too early projection for Penn State was 9.8 wins and 2.2 losses. Obviously, the prediction stayed the same at 11-1. However, the projection took just a slight bump up to 9.9 wins, with 6.9 wins and 2.1 losses in the Big Ten. Now, the floor for Penn State is going to be 9-3. Not very many tough games on their schedule, especially with how easy the non-conference is. So I think worst case scenario, we see a Penn State team with 3 losses, all in the Big Ten, and the ceiling is going to be 12-0. Again, there are very few teams who have the capability to go 12-0 in 2025. Penn State, one of those few, along with the other 3 teams that we have done predictions for so far. So make sure to go check those out if you haven't already. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.